Thank you for joining us for today's presentation, From Zero to Online Photo Submission, Best Practices When You Have to Implement Quickly. I'm Dawn Thomas, NACWA Executive Director. Joining me today are Deb Nightingale, Director of ID and Campus Services at Liberty University, and Richard Wynn, Director of Eagle Card Program at Georgia Southern University. Deb and Richard, it's wonderful to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you.
So, as Dawn said, I'm from Georgia Southern University, and just a little bit before I move over to the slides about Georgia Southern, we have 3 campuses, one in Statesboro, Georgia, one in Savannah, Georgia, and a small campus in Hinesville, Georgia. We have approximately 27,000 students among the 3 campuses. We are having in-person classes as well as hybrid and online classes. So to start out with, why did we want to do online photo submission? Well, our student affairs group announced in May that all of our orientations, we call them SOAR, we're going to go virtual. After talking with student affairs and talking with auxiliary services, dining, and the vice presidents, they still wanted us to be able to issue an Eagle card. So since we normally have 10 orientation sessions coming in for doing that, the only real option that we would have is to do online photo submission. Our administration wasn't going to make a decision on whether or not we were going to have classes either in person or online until late June, which if we started to bring people in at that time, it would have been too late for us to really be able to get those 3,000 or 4,000 people and get cards in their hands. Because of the pandemic, I had anticipated that we were really going to need to implement online photo submission. It was going to absolutely be required for our card issuance. So I had contacted Transact, talked to them, got some pricing, presented everything so that we were ready to move when they finally made the decision. Now, online photo submission is readily available if you're using Transact accounts. And fortunately, that was a system that we had been using for several years. One of the other things with online photo submission is customer service. You can cut down the amount of complaints you get about photos. Now, our orientation sessions happen during the summer, and we're in the South, and it's very humid, and we have terrible weather, and we get a lot of complaints about people coming in and saying, "Oh, I didn't know you were going to take my picture today." So having the ability for them to submit their photo, I think, is going to help us to reduce the complaints that we get about that. And then most importantly, online photo submission is going to help us to be socially distanced and help to mitigate the issues that are coming up from the pandemic that we're in the middle of. So why didn't I do photo submission before this? Well, Georgia Southern uses iris cameras for entering into our dining facilities. And the enrollment into the iris camera system is part of our card issuance process. So when a student comes in, we look up their Eagle ID number, we take their picture, we submit that picture to the printer to print their Eagle ID card, and at that point, we have that student walk up and we have them enroll in the iris camera system. About 60 or 65% of our students are able to enroll in that system before the card even hits the hopper there. Our orientation sessions, their attendance is about 350 students. You start adding the family and friends, and you're up around 900 folks that are there. So they're big lines, but our process is very efficient. We've been doing it for a number of years. We've worked very, very closely with orientation. And so on their schedule, we are there. They can come to the Eagle Card Services between 10 in the morning and noon. And we get all 350 generally done by a little after 11. So the important part of that is that we're getting the card in their hands, and they have to use their card for their meals that they're going to have for orientation, not just for the students, but their family and friends as well. There is no doubt in my mind that we do better photos than most people take with either their cell phone or their other cameras. We have better quality control. We know that we're going to put somebody up against the type of background we want. If anything goes awry, we can quickly retake that picture. We're very good at it, so I know we're going to get good photos that we'll be able to discern who is in that photo on that ID card. And another important process was that FaceTime with students and family. While we have everything online, every question you could possibly ask in our FAQs and our websites, students and family members still want FaceTime. They want to talk to you face to face. They want those questions answered with you. And orientation was part of that process. Lots of questions got answered. We gave out lots of information to students. I was also very concerned with the additional labor that we were going to have with processing photos. So if you have a student who submits a photo and it's a good photo, it's really not a problem. We can get ready to do the printing process, but it's those rejections that are difficult. Sometimes it's just not, while there's a standard template to send a rejected photo back, not all of them fit into that. And somebody's going to have to sit down and write an email and tell them what the problem is with their photo or their government issued ID card, their documentation that they have to provide with that. So I was quite concerned on what impact that was going to have. But all these things considered, life has changed for all of us, and we are going to move forward with online photo submission. So what was our plan to do this? I thought long and hard about it. I contacted Student Affairs, and the orientation group had a special report written for me so I could see who all the newly enrolled students were going to be. I would use this report to build a email invitation list that I was going to send to all oncoming students. The online photo submission has an area in there where you can take this file, process it in there, and it's going to send those invitations out. In the invitations, we outline the process for online photo submission. Look directly at the camera, don't wear any hats, make sure that you can smile, but make sure that there's nobody in the background. It needs to be just you. We had all that outlined in there. And then once we got an approved photo, we'd print a card, we'd verify that it was the correct card with the correct name, with the correct picture. And then we were going to snail mail all of the Eagle cards to the students to the address that was on file in our student information system, their home address. We created a letter for a mail merger so that snail mail that got to them, that would be personalized to them. It would have their name and Eagle ID number on there. Also, we needed to make sure that we would document the state of where the online photo submission was. If it was accepted, that wasn't a problem. You were going to get a response back from the online photo submission. But what about when was it printed? When was it mailed? We needed to make sure that we had a way to track this in the process. And that was something that online photo submission didn't have available. So the first thing we did is we started to test with the staff. Now, this is part of the e-account service portal. This is where online photo submission is going to be enabled. So when Transact came in to set that up for us and do training, it was very quick, only took a couple hours. The one that I have highlighted down there says online photo submission, and it says unavailable. You would think that this should be set to available, but what happens when that's set to available is anybody who is in e-accounts, which is all of our sophomores, juniors, and seniors, can go into their profile and submit a new photo. I wasn't aware of this, and we found it out while we were doing the staff testing when all of a sudden we had a few photos pop up from people who didn't have invitations. So we turned that off. So we wanted to make sure that we were going to isolate who all our new students were going to be, and that we weren't going to be encumbered by those sophomores, juniors, and seniors that are out there. So I used that report that I got from orientations and sent the email invitation to specific orientation groups. Now, this is a quick snapshot of a dashboard that's available in online photo submission. Well, it's kind of nice and it gives you some information real quick. It didn't give the type of details that Student Affairs and Auxiliary Services was looking for on how the status of our online photo submission was going. So I had a conversation with Carla Gibson at Georgia Tech. You know, this is one of the things that's great about NACU is that we have all these folks that we've networked with and we can talk to about how they've implemented different solutions. And Carla and I talked about using the customer defined fields in Transact in order to help us track and run reports in the future. So this is an example of the customer import tool that I use. I created a different file that was going to have a list of Eagle ID numbers, and it was going to tell us what the SOAR they attended. Again, SOAR is our orientation sessions. So that I could populate that field. And if you'll notice on here with this, I use unique file names. I always use for the import, and I also always track all the logs and all the error files, and I keep all that stuff for audit purposes. So I was going to use this tool twice. Once for when we sent out the email invitation, and then another time for when we actually printed it. So this is a snapshot of the customer-defined fields in Transact. So this particular student, when I look at the yellow, they were a dual enrolled student, and we emailed them their invitation on June 4th of 2020. But you'll notice that the card wasn't printed till 8/20 of 2020. This was one of the gotchas that we found. All of our dual enrolled, these students, we could not get the Georgia Southern email addresses for, so we sent it to their personal email address, and that created a lot of problems, something that we're going to be that we've addressed in the future. We had very, very limited number of people who from the dual enrolled who did this. It was out of the 600 I think I sent there, I think we got 20 who did that. So we're going to use Transact then to identify the different cohorts we had there, to identify the different print dates that we did things. And again, we're going to use the Transact import tools to do this. So here's an example of a report that I can run after the fact. So Student Affairs wanted to know how many people in this particular cohort didn't submit photos yet. So I could go into the report utility. I put in what that SOAR attended was like. It was the 7th of July of 2020, and where we didn't print a card yet. And I could provide that to them so that they could do some targeting back to those particular students to let them know that they still needed to submit an online photo. So what were the results of all this? Well, to start off with, because our orientations, they had to bring things, make changes so quickly. We weren't really as prominent in the process as we needed to be. So students didn't always feel, they didn't get the information of how important it was to submit their online photo so we could get their cards to them in a timely basis. The student participation, as we got into August, we had sent out 6,000 invitations, but yet we only had 65% students that submitted photos to us. It made for a very, very difficult opening week of Georgia Southern. So some of the problems that we did find and we've discussed with Student Affairs is that while we crafted a welcome email to them, to welcome invitation to them to submit their online photo, they did not read or follow directions. They wouldn't follow through after submitting a picture. So we required to have a picture, a photo of them, and we also required a photo of their government issued ID, driver's license, military ID, passport. A lot of them would just send their picture and they wouldn't send the additional documentation with that. We couldn't produce the card until we had everything. One of the reasons why we do require government issued photo ID is because you can use a Georgia Southern ID to register to vote in Georgia. So we wanted to make sure that we were doing that accurately. It's been a process that we've had in place for many years. No pictures of picture. So they didn't want to take a picture of themselves, so they take a picture of themselves, which was kind of strange. We had a lot of students who would resubmit the same rejected photo. We would tell them what the problem was with the online photo that they submitted, but they would just resubmit it and resubmit it. And sometimes 5 or 6 times we would have to go through before we could finally get what we needed in order to produce their card. And one of the odd problems that we found is that some students would forward a link to their friends and said, hey, I got this, and they'll send that link over to their friend. Well, that link is specific to an Eagle ID. So if that friend submitted, then that Eagle ID would be associated with the friend and not the original person who it was supposed to go to. So we had to make sure that we did a lot of cross-checking to make sure that the government issued ID matched with the Georgia Southern email address and matched with the names as well as the date of birth. And then the US mail, as with all of us, the mail was certainly affected by the pandemic that's going on. It took a very long time for some of the cards to go from Statesboro, Georgia up to northern Georgia, sometimes 2 weeks. So we had to make sure that before students were coming back to school, which was in August 17th is when classes started again, we picked a date where we would no longer mail out Eagle cards any longer of August 3rd. We just didn't feel with the mail being as slow as it was that they'd be able to do that. And unfortunately, that would require that student to come into card services in order to get their card. We didn't print all those cards that were sitting in that queue. We would print them on demand because we just felt trying to have a bundle of 500, 600, thousands of cards out there and trying to work your way through it to get those wouldn't work very well. So it did work okay with us doing the print on demand at that point. And the next slide I'm going to have here is some of the rejected photos that I'd like to share with you. My favorite, of course, is the one that's in the center. I don't know what he was thinking when he had his hat on backwards and decided that he was going to smoke a cigarette and this was going to be the way he was going to represent himself to Georgia Southern. But he did submit it. We did get it corrected. Some of the other photos that are there up in the upper right and upper left-hand corner look like nice photos, but we couldn't really use them. There's whether the background is a problem in there or it's a black and white photo, it just wouldn't work. The other young lady had her hands up and that wouldn't work. And the gentleman in the middle is trying to give a peace sign or something with the hat on. So none of that worked. And the one in the bottom right-hand corner is the one who submitted a photo of their photo to try and use that for the Eagle ID card. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Deb Nightingale from Liberty University, and she's going to tell us about their implementation of online photo submission.
Hi, afternoon. This is Deb, and I'm from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. We have one campus, unlike the challenges of Richard, and we have 15,000 residential students, half of which commute into the campus, the other half which live on campus. And we have currently about 102,000 online students. So we have quite a population. And unlike Richard, we did not have to hit the ground running this year with all the problems and issues presented to all of us with COVID, because we had an in-house developed solution for photo upload that we've been utilizing since the fiscal year 2014-2015. And that was implemented initially because we had a number of complaints about lines at move-in and orientation, and it was hopeful that this would address some of those issues. Our solution is accessed via someone who already has Liberty University credentials. So they're using their login credentials to go to this web application to process through for their ID. And if they have not completed a registration, including what we call here financial check-in, so they've had to agree to a financial contract to become a student, they cannot access the application. So that helps us tremendously. They are given the option to have it mailed. The mailing address has to be one that we have on file with them in their Banner account. We use Banner, and we're also a Transact school. And they can also pick up their credential. This year, obviously, we were pushing a lot more towards the mail. But as Richard stated, we also have to implement every year a cutoff date so that students who are coming to campus don't cross with their ID being sent in the mail. So there is a small cadre that still require a pickup, but we have a good solution for that. And we do that in a different location than those who need a photo coming to campus still. We do offer this for new cards, for replacements as well. And we do a back-end process for the charge for that. And also if they only want to update their photo, and that's mostly used by our faculty. And as I said, it's open to all students, but it's really geared towards our residential population on campus. Next slide. So our approach initially when we started this was mailing and email complaints. I'm sorry, email campaigns. That must have been a Freudian slip. That was not as effective as where we are today in terms of the engagement from the student population. We were able to add this process of receiving your photo ID through the photo upload as part of the new student checklist. And that rolled out last year, and we saw a tremendous improvement on engagement with that. So as the students come in and they're walked through their checklist on what they need to do next after this, this, and this, their final step is to utilize the photo upload application to receive their ID. We initially added that to the checklist for all students and rolled it back within a day. Once we realized all of our online students, we were just deluged with requests. So that is only part of the checklist for our residential students at this point in time. As you can imagine, we don't want to have to print and send out 100,000 or so IDs. We also follow up, as Richard said, that his office does, via email for any freshmen or transfers who are moving on campus who may not have participated in using the photo upload prior to move-in start. And we coordinate that data with housing to make sure that we know who's coming on campus. We compare it to who we've already issued through the photo upload to ensure that they are all set when they come to campus. It just helps them not to have to make an additional stop. And especially this year with the delay move-in process, it was very helpful for the students. We daily review our submissions, and our process for printing and mailing has pretty much become just part of our normal business operation process. Our team goes through every morning. Part of our app has a built-in response that tells, that has reasons why your photo may not be accepted and generates emails back to the students for those that are not acceptable photos. And as Richard pointed out, there will always be unacceptable photos, no matter what you do. So adapting to change is something we're all pretty familiar with this year. If we were not in the past, I think we all have that in common. Our orientations actually were eliminated in 2019. So we found just having the photo upload for that last year was just tremendously helpful. But again, as Richard stated, orientations were a time when we liked to disseminate a lot of information and connect with families and students. And having orientation eliminated resulted in a huge surge at move-in time. So again, having a photo upload helps with that. You want to, kind of parse off as many as you can so that you are able to serve your population well, and you're not into a situation with lines and waiting and frustration. COVID mitigation was really huge this year, not just for the students and their parents, but also for our staff. It was very important that we were able to provide our service and not have to have them come in person to the office. So that just became a huge player for us. And obviously, we want to meet student expectations. I think students are used to having things delivered to them and used to doing things online. And we want to enhance their experience and make their attendance to our school and their connection to our school as pleasurable as possible. So we've pressed forward over the last 4 or so years, and we have learned a few things that are helpful. We provide visual helps, because it doesn't matter what you have for a list in your app as to what type of photo you need to submit, they're not going to read. So as you can see on the bottom of that screen, we provided just a nice, clean, I'm sorry that it's so small you can't see it, but it just kind of shows them what your photo should look like and highlights the different areas that we look at when we review your photo. We also found that because we don't touch the students as we would like to touch them, or the parents as much, is we developed additional information in our card holder that we use, our mailers that we use to send cards out. And we just kind of highlighted some of the financial pieces of the card, our declining balance, what to do and what not to do with your card, etc. The other thing that we have found over the years that's very valuable, and Richard also alluded to, very important for his Student Affairs division, was to track data. We want to make sure that we know what population is making use of this application, how well it's working, and also to improve processes on our side for our team. And in conjunction with that, we developed a 2-question survey. It's really a 1-question survey with a comment line that whenever a card is in its final stage, they get the email that says, congratulations, thank you, your card is on its way. There is a one-line survey for them to respond to, so that we can gauge from their perspective. So the value of this, as I've mentioned throughout, is that it really has helped tremendously, both with our staff, with the student. We have seen ongoing increases in our participation rate. We've seen ongoing customer satisfaction rate. We did from our 1-question survey, we were able to exceed 90% satisfaction rate with the entire process, and that's from submission of photo to receipt of ID and any follow-up. And that was a goal that we had in our own overview of our efficiency as a department, and we were very pleased with that. We continually tweak and improve this process, and I think you all will find yourself in that role, that no matter what you use for photo upload, whether it's by your provider or it's an independent or a homegrown application, you're going to want to tweak and improve those business processes. And I think managing hardware and staffing is really a great outcome of delivering a photo upload solution, because we are able to track and see when our peaks and valleys are at move-in with regard to how many people still require a photo. And it does help with managing a little bit less hardware on our side. And preparing for our future. We are not yet with mobile credential, though we would like to go that way, and having a photo upload is critical to self-provisioning a mobile credential. So we're excited that when we do move into that venue, that we'll have really conquered this side of the photo acquisition. Thank you. So I guess Richard and Donna, we would open up to any questions that there might be in that we could, if anybody has a question, that we could assist with.
I noted in the chat, we have a question from Jody at Providence College. I believe it's directed to Richard based on his presentation. How many reminders did you have to send to receive 65% submitted photos?
I had it set up to send 7 reminders. So once a week, it would send a reminder to them. And I think it was more our orientation folks sending information out to students that got the numbers up there than it was the reminders that sending the link again over and over. And happy Halloween.
That is the only question we've received in the chat at this time. We would welcome any other questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask a question to Richard or Deb, or you can share your question in the chat. From Abe. Abe has asked, do your ID cards mailed out, are they inactive at first? What risk management do you have in place for lost cards?
I can speak from our side that, when we first rolled out our program, that was part of our application. We did a little bit of forethought on that, and we wanted to ensure that an active card did not get mailed. So we do put an active end date in the record of the card holder so that the card is not active until it is received. We do have another back-end process built in that they can go in and acknowledge that they've received it, and then we go and remove that active end date. So yes, that is a very important thing. Thank you for bringing it up, Abe.
That is, Abe. And No, we sent out active cards, but there were zero balances in the stored value accounts. There were no dining plans that were assigned at that time. But we all learned from these presentations, and some of the stuff that Deb pointed out is, I'm going to have to steal some of that stuff from you, Deb. And that is a great idea to send them out inactive. But again, we were trying to do this so fast and so furious that that's one of the things that we certainly overlooked. And I appreciate somebody bringing that up.
Okay, we have another question. This is from Michelle at University of Wisconsin-Madison. How much do you spend on average to mail cards, and do you charge the students or faculty for that?
Georgia Southern does not. It didn't cost card services anything. While you know, you're going to have the stamp that's going to be on there, the printing process that's going to be in there. But we did have a COVID fund, so all of those fees that we were charged for that came out of a COVID fund and not out of my budget.
We do incur a mailing cost because mailing costs are relegated back to departments in our budgetary setup, but we do provide a budget for mailing every year. We have noticed that has gone up significantly over the past year, and we might have a little bit of a shortfall this year in that budget line, simply because of COVID and the need to do many more via photo upload. But I don't have an exact amount for you. It's really dependent on the number of cards that we send out. But I can tell you that we do not recoup any costs from the faculty, staff, or students for that.
No questions at the queue this time. I'll ask once again in case anyone has a last question they would like to ask. Oh, we do have one. Here's from Tony at CloudCard. Richard, how long did it take to deploy online photo submission before you were able to send invitations? How much effort was it on your side?
Oh, that's a good question, Tony. And once it was set up, it took more time for us to make sure that we had our email templates set right, because that would go back and forth between student affairs and card services to make sure the language was okay, to make sure that the HTML code that was in there wasn't doing any funny. It took probably a week of back and forth to do that before we could send invitations out. But we were sending invitations out starting in May.
No further questions at this time. Thank you to both Deb and Richard today for being our presenters and sharing their experiences with us. To all of our viewers, thank you for your attention and for always supporting NACU programs. Special thanks again to Richard and Deb. I'm Dawn Thomas with NACU. Thanks for joining us and have a great rest of your day.